Christmas Eve, 1971. High above the Amazon rainforest, LANSA flight. 508 slices through the Peruvian sky. Inside, passengers dream of holiday reunions. 17-year-old Julian Kopke is among them, gazing out the window, excited to see her father. Beside her sits her mother, Maria, a renowned ornithologist, lost in her notes. Julian is no stranger to this wilderness. Raised at a research station deep in the jungle, she understands the forest's secrets better than most. She can read animal tracks and recognize the calls of countless birds, but the survival skills learned at her parents' side could unprepare her for the nightmare about to unfold. Suddenly, the sky turns black. The plane is swallowed by a monstrous storm cloud. Violent turbulence throws everyone against their seats. Oxygen masks drop. Panic erupts. Julianne grips her mother's hand as a blinding flash of lightning strikes the right wing, followed by a deafening explosion. The engine is on fire. Someone screams, then a horrifying tearing sound. The fuselage rips apart like paper. The cabin depressurizes, sucking everything and everyone out into the storm. The last thing Julianne sees is her mother's terrified face. Before she, still strapped to her seat, is violently ejected into the abyss. She is in free fall. 3,000 meters, almost 2 miles, plummeting through the storm. The wind howls, spinning her uncontrollably. Below, the Amazon is an endless sea of green. Above, the flaming wreckage of the plane paints black streaks across the gray sky. Miraculously, she doesn't lose consciousness. Her mind, with a strange and terrifying clarity, records every second of the fall. She sees the treetops rushing up to meet her, a dense canopy of interwoven branches. And then, impact. The ancient trees of the Amazon become her unlikely saviors. Their branches, layer after layer, act like a series of natural shock absorbers, breaking her fall. The seat she's strapped to smashes through the upper canopy. Then successive layers of vegetation cushion the impact, bleeding off kinetic energy until she finally crashes through the undergrowth and lands on the soft, damp forest floor. The silence that follows is deafening. Julianne wakes up the next day. Pain is her first sensation. She slowly assesses her injuries. A broken collarbone, deep cuts on her leg, a swollen ankle, and blurred vision in one eye. But against all odds, she is alive. Impossibly, miraculously alive. Of the 92 people on board LANSA Flight 508, she is the sole survivor of the crash itself. The jungle stretches in every direction, an impenetrable green labyrinth. She is hundreds of kilometers from civilization, with no supplies, no gear, just a torn summer dress and a single sandal. The chilling memory of seeing the lifeless bodies of other passengers, some still strapped to their seats in the trees, haunts her. She waits for a day, hoping for rescue. But as the sounds of the jungle intensify with the falling night, a grim reality sets in. No one is coming. Not soon. Maybe never. It is December 25th. Her Christmas gift is a brutal test of survival. Stay and wait for death, or walk through one of the most hostile environments on Earth. She chooses to walk. Her father had taught her a crucial survival rule. When lost in the jungle, follow water. Waterways are often used by people, and they lead to larger rivers, and eventually, civilization. She finds a small stream. It's a start. For the next 10 days, Julianne's life becomes a grueling ordeal. Wading through knee-deep water, her open wounds become a feast for insects. Maggots infest the gash on her arm. Leeches cling to her legs. She has no food, except for a small bag of candy she found in the wreckage, which she rations carefully. The jungle is a constant threat. She has to be careful with every step, wary of venomous snakes, spiders, and the jaguars she hears roaring in the distance. The nights are filled with the unnerving sounds of the wild, and the days are a humid, oppressive struggle. She stumbles upon a clearing with the bodies of 3 other passengers, still strapped in their seats, driven headfirst into the ground. The sight is horrifying, but it steels her resolve. She can't give up. Days blur into a monotonous cycle of pain, hunger, and exhaustion. The little stream grows into a small river. She follows it, sometimes swimming, sometimes walking along its banks. Her one remaining sandal is long gone. Her feet are raw and bloody. The hunger is a constant, gnawing ache. She is dizzy, weak, and on the verge of collapse. Hallucinations begin to blur the line between reality and nightmare. But still, she pushes forward, driven by the memory of her parents and the survival lessons ingrained in her since childhood. She recognizes certain plants, avoiding the poisonous ones. She knows the dangers of drinking stagnant water. On the 10th day, just as she feels her strength finally giving out, she sees it. A small, motorized canoe moored to the riverbank. It's the first sign of human life she has seen since the crash. Hope, fierce and overwhelming, surges through her. Nearby, she finds a small, thatched roof hut used by local lumberjacks. It's empty, but there's a small outboard motor and a canister of gasoline. Remembering how her father treated a dog's maggot infestation, she uses a tube to siphon gasoline and pours it over the wound on her arm. The pain is excruciating, but one by one, the maggots are forced out. She spends the night in the hut, too weak to go on. The next morning, she hears voices. 3 Peruvian lumberjacks are returning to their camp. When they see her, a thin, ghost-like figure with blonde hair, covered in mud and blood, they are startled, thinking she is a water spirit from local folklore. But Julianne, who learned Spanish in Lima, explains her story. The men, though initially frightened, are kind. They clean her wounds with local remedies, heap her food, and let her rest. The next day, they take her on a grueling 7-hour canoe journey downriver to a small village. From there, she is airlifted to a hospital in Pucallpa. Her miraculous story of survival against impossible odds becomes global news. She had fallen nearly 2 miles from the sky, survived the crash, and then walked for 11 days through the dense, unforgiving Amazon rainforest. Juliane Kopkisordaldidenti end with her rescue. The loss of a mother and the trauma of the crash left deep emotional scars, but she channeled her experience and her family's legacy into her life's work. Like her parents, she became a biologist, earning a doctorate and returning to Peru to study bats. She took over the management of the Panguana research station her parents founded, dedicating her life to preserving the very rainforest that both took her mother and saved her life. Julianne's story is not just about survival. It's a testament to the incredible power of the human spirit, the importance of knowledge, and the profound, and sometimes brutal, relationship between humanity and the natural world.
On the morning of her 2nd day alone, Julianne made the decision that would ultimately save her life. She recalled a piece of wisdom her father, a zoologist, had repeated during their expeditions. If you're ever lost in the jungle, find a stream, follow the water. It will lead you to a bigger river, and rivers are where you'll find people. It was a simple, logical rule, but in the overwhelming, chaotic expanse of the Amazon, it was her only lifeline. Dragging her battered body through the dense, unforgiving vegetation, Julianne began her search for running water. Every movement sent waves of agony through her. The jungle around her was a symphony of disturbing sounds and deadly beauty. Scarlet macaws shrieked from the canopy, spider monkeys watched with unnerving curiosity, and somewhere in the distance she heard the deep, guttural roar of a jaguar. It took nearly a full day of painful searching before she found it, a tiny trickle of water, barely a few inches wide, snaking its way between the gnarled roots of ancient trees. It wasn't much, but it was moving. A surge of hope, the first she'd felt, washed over her. This tiny stream was her compass, her guide out of the green labyrinth. She began to follow it, stumbling over the uneven ground, her one remaining sandal offering little protection. Thorns tore at her skin, exposed roots tripped her at every turn. But she pushed onward, her eyes locked on the water as it slowly grew, fed by unseen tributaries. By the third day, a gnawing hunger began to torment her. Julianne knew intellectually that the forest was full of food, fruits, nuts, even edible insects. But her theoretical knowledge was useless now. So many vibrant tropical fruits were poisonous, so many colorful mushrooms were deadly traps. She had watched her father collect samples hundreds of times, but alone and desperate, she couldn't trust her own hazy memory. The risk was too great. Then a small miracle. Clinging to the tattered remains of her dress, she found a small bag of mints from the flight. There were only a few, but to Julianne they were a lifeline, a promise of a few more days. She rationed them with extreme care, allowing herself to suck on a single mint each day, savoring the slow release of sugar as she walked. But thirst was the more immediate threat. It was a cruel irony. She was surrounded by water from the humid air and constant rain to the streams all around her, yet finding safe drinking water was a life or death challenge. Stagnant water was a death sentence, a cocktail of parasites and bacteria. She needed clean running water. When she finally reached a part of the stream that cascaded over rocks, she knelt and drank greedily. The water was cool and tasted of the earth, the most delicious thing she had ever known. The nights were a special kind of hell. Without shelter, she huddled between the giant buttress roots of kapok trees, trying to shield herself from the relentless rain and the unseen nocturnal predators. The jungle's nightly chorus was deafening, a chaotic symphony of crickets, frogs, and the distant cries of larger animals. Sleep was impossible. She could only doze in short, fitful bursts, her senses on high alert, her heart pounding with fear. On the fourth day, she stumbled upon more wreckage from the plain. Twisted pieces of metal were strewn across a small clearing, and then she saw something that froze her in place. 3 bodies, still strapped into their seats, hanging from the trees like grotesque puppets. She recognized one of them, a woman who had been sitting a few rows behind her. It was a moment that could have broken her. The horror and grief were overwhelming, but something inside Julianne hardened. These bodies were a stark reminder. She had survived against all odds. To give up now, to squander this second chance, would be a betrayal to them, to everyone who had perished. But with a newfound grim determination, she turned back to the stream, which had now grown into a respectable creek. The vegetation along its banks was less dense, and she could walk in the shallow water, which was a relief for her injured feet. On the 5th day, they appeared vultures, 3 of them circling low above the canopy, watching her with a professional, patient interest. Julianne knew what their presence meant. To them, she was already dead, just a meal waiting to happen. The sight of those black silhouettes hovering, waiting, filled her with a cold, defiant rage. She would not become carrion. Not today, not ever. Her body was failing. The deep gash on her right leg had become badly infected. The skin around it was hot, swollen, and red streaks, a classic sign of sepsis, were spreading. Worst of all, blowflies had laid eggs in the open wound, and now dozens of fat white maggots were writhing beneath her skin. She knew she had to get them out. She tried squeezing the wound, but the pain was unbearable, and the larvae were too deep. Desperate, she used a ring she was still wearing to try and dig them out. One by one, an agonizing and only partially successful process. By the 7th day, the creek had transformed into a small river about 30 feet wide, its current moving with force. She could hear the roar of rapids ahead. This was good news. A bigger river meant a higher chance of finding a human settlement, but it also brought new dangers. Alligators sunned themselves on the muddy banks. She spotted one massive specimen, at least 10 feet long, watching her with cold reptilian eyes as she carefully skirted the opposite bank, remembering her father's warnings. And then there were the snakes. The Amazon is home to some of the world's most venomous species: bushmasters, jararakas, coral snakes, all perfectly camouflaged. Every single step could be her last. She developed a slow, exhausting routine. Look, test the ground with a stick, then step. With each passing day, she grew weaker. Starvation had consumed all her body fat, and her muscles were beginning to break down. The infection in her leg was spreading, causing a fever that left her alternating between violent chills and drenching sweats. Her vision would blur, and she drifted in and out of consciousness. In one delirious moment, she thought she saw her mother walking ahead of her along the riverbank, beckoning her forward. She called out, stumbled, and fell to her knees in the water. When her vision cleared, there was only the indifferent forest and the endless river. On the 10th day, something changed. The river had widened, and Julianne noticed something unnatural on the bank. Trees with distinct cut marks made by human tools. Her heart hammered in her chest. This meant lagers or rubber tappers. People. She began scanning the riverbank with desperate intensity, and then, rounding a bend, she saw it. A small canoe tied to a stake, and just beyond it, a primitive hut with a thatched roof. She staggered toward it, barely believing her eyes. The hut was empty, likely a temporary shelter for workers. But inside she found treasure: a plastic tarp, some empty sacks, and a small outboard motor covered by the tarp. Next to it was a can of fuel. Julianne knew exactly what she had to do. She remembered her father explaining how gasoline could be used to clean infested wounds. With trembling hands, she opened the can. Summoning every last ounce of her courage, she poured the corrosive liquid directly into her infected, maggot-filled wound. The pain was beyond anything imaginable. It was a white-hot, searing agony, as if her entire leg had been set on fire. She bit down hard on a piece of wood to keep from screaming, tears of pure agony streaming down her face. But it worked. One by one, the maggots began to squirm their way out of the wound, driven out by the chemical. She counted over 30 of them as they fell onto the tarp. Exhausted beyond comprehension, Julianne wrapped herself in the plastic tarp, and there, in the small, empty hut, for the first time in 10 days, she fell into a deep, profound sleep. She had survived the fall. She had survived the jungle. Now, all she had to do was wait. Help was coming. Julianne Cope's story is a powerful testament to human resilience.
Julianne awoke to the sound of men speaking Spanish. For a moment, caught between sleep and wakefulness, she thought she was delirious again. But then, she heard it clearly. Footsteps approaching the cabin, oars beating against a canoe, and the deep laughter of men. She tried to stand, but her body refused. 10 days of deprivation had taken their toll. With a supreme effort, she managed to sound, half scream, half whisper, "Help, ... please, ... The voices stopped. Then, quick footsteps. The hut door swung open, and 3 men froze, paralyzed by what they saw. A skeletal young woman, covered in mud and blood, her summer dress in tatters, staring at them with sunken eyes still burning with an iron will to live. "Dios mío," one of them murmuré. They were local loggers, and at first, they thought she was a ghost. A white girl, alone, deep in the Amazon. Impossible, but there she was, desperately alive. With surprising gentleness, they carried her from the hut. The eldest, Marcio, took charge. First, clean water. Then, food, just a little rice, banana, and cassava flour. To Julianne, it was a feast for kings. As she ate, she tried to explain in broken Spanish. Plane ... crashed. ... Storm ... Alone ... 10 days. ... The men exchanged looks of disbelief. They'd heard about the LANSA flight that had vanished on Christmas Eve, but the search had found nothing. And now, here was a survivor who had walked through one of the deadliest terrains on Earth. Marcio examined her injuries. He knew the jungle, and the fact that this girl had survived a plane crash and nearly 2 weeks alone was a miracle. The infections were serious, but by a stroke of luck. She had found a can of fuel the night before and used it to flush out maggots from a wound, likely saving her from a fatal infection. Still, she needed a hospital, and the nearest town was a 7-hour boat ride away. They let her rest, giving her clean clothes and applying a paste of medicinal herbs to her wounds. As they worked, Julianne finally let herself cry. Not tears of despair, but of profound relief. She had survived, but they were also tears of grief. She knew her mother was gone. Maria Cuebga, the brilliant scientist who loved this very forest, had perished within it. At 3 in the afternoon, they placed Julianne in a long canoe, covering her with a tarp. The motor roared to life, and they began their journey. Every jolt sent waves of pain through her. But she stayed conscious, watching the jungle slide by. When they passed other boats, Marcio would shout, "Airplane, Sir Bibor! We're taking her to the hospital!" News traveled fast. When they arrived in the town of Tornavista after midnight, a crowd was waiting. A local teacher had already broadcast the incredible news on his shortwave radio. From there, Julianne was flown to a hospital in Puc. The irony of flying again so soon was lost on her. She was simply too exhausted. Doctors worked for hours, treating her wounds, severe dehydration, and malnutrition. Her father, Hans Wilhelm, had spent 10 days in agony. When he got the call, he could hardly believe it. Julianne was alive. He raced to the hospital, and their reunion was a torrent of joy and sorrow-joy for her survival. Devastation for the loss of his wife, Maria. Guided by Julian's information, rescue teams finally located the wreckage of Lanza Flight 508. What they found confirmed her story. She was the sole survivor. The plane had disintegrated in midair, scattering debris across miles of jungle. Her mother's body was found still strapped to her seat. Investigators believed she died on impact, a sad consolation for Julianne. Knowing her mother hadn't suffered alone in the forest, Julianne's story captivated the world. She became the miracle girl who fell from the sky. But how did she survive a 10,000-foot fall? Experts believe a combination of factors saved her: being strapped to her seat row, which acted like a rudimentary parachute, the storm's powerful updraft slowing her descent, and the dense, multi-layered canopy of the Amazon, which cushioned her fall. But even 10 doctors agreed it was sheer luck. A few millimeters difference in her trajectory, and the outcome would have been fatal. What truly fascinated survival experts was how she navigated the jungle. Her decision to follow water was textbook. Not eating unfamiliar plants saved her from poisoning. She never panicked, never gave up. She had transformed years of casual observation from her parents' research into life-saving knowledge. After 3 weeks in the hospital, Julianne returned to Germany to finish her studies. She earned a doctorate in zoology. Just like her parents, specializing in bats, it was as if she needed to understand the very environment that both nearly killed her and saved her. Decades later, she returned to Peru, retracing her 11-day journey for a documentary. Standing on the riverbank that led her to safety, she said, "The jungle is not evil. It simply is. It has no malice, no mercy. It follows its own rules, and if you respect them, you can survive." My parents taught me this, and it was this knowledge that kept me alive. Today, Julianne Diller continues her parents' legacy, managing the Panguana Research Station in Peru. Her story isn't just about luck. It's about resilience, knowledge, and the refusal to surrender. The vultures that followed her through the jungle didn't get their meal. Instead, they witnessed the triumph of the human spirit. Julianne didn't just survive the unthinkable, she thrived, turning trauma into purpose. Her life is a testament to the fact that even when we fall from the sky, the human spirit has an extraordinary ability to find its way home. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as incredible as we did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing true stories. We'll see you in the next one.